from September 29, 2010. The following is a replay of VoterRadio.com's coverage of a forum featuring female candidates for the North Carolina Supreme Court, Court of Appeals, and Wake County Clerk of Court. The forum was presented by the Junior League of Raleigh and moderated by Damon Circosta of the North Carolina Center for Voter Education.
Hi, I'm Dana Jennings, the CEO of the North Carolina Center for Women in Public Service. And for those of you who are not familiar with us, our mission is to prepare women to seek and serve in both elected and appointed office for statewide and nonpartisan. So thank you, Merritt, for inviting us to come use this space because it's gorgeous. Don't you think this is just a great facility? Which is a testament to her. And thank you for all the Junior League members who were here this evening assisting with us. I also wanted to recognize Dr. David McLennan as the creator, the visionary behind this event. It was 8 years ago that you held your first candidates forum with a focus on women. 14 years ago. I'm sorry. 14 years ago, with the emphasis being on women and not a traditional format of a candidate forum, but more women talking about the challenges and advantages they have as women in the political service arena. So, David, thank you for your vision. I just wanted to give you a little bit of information. We've made great strides in North Carolina in the judiciary at the local, state, federal level, and in legislative positioning. But when you think about it, 54.1% of all the registered voters in North Carolina are women. So you would think there'd be even greater representation than there is. I'm just going to go up the hierarchy of the courts and give you a little taste of how we're doing with female representation on those different positions. So, of the 273 district court judges, 96 are women. That's just about 36%. 7 of the 109 superior court judges are women, which is about 6.4%. 8 of the 15 judges on the Court of Appeals are women. Sherry Beasley, Wanda Bryant, Anne Marie Calabria, Martha Geer, Barbara Jackson, Linda McGee, Linda Stevens, and Donna Stroud. And then currently, 3 of the Supreme Court justices, state Supreme Court justices, are women. Our Chief Justice, Sarah Parker, and then Associate Justices Patricia Timmons-Goodson and Robin Hudson. So we're making progress in different arenas. You need to know as women that you need to get out there and mobilize yourselves and your sisters and your friends to vote so that we can make a difference and have a voice at the table. We're going to hear tonight what these women's stories are, how they've gotten interested in public service, where it's taken them, what their vision is for their organization, and learn more about that. So, Damon, we're going to invite Damon up. David Circosta he's not the token male on the board of directors, but he is an integral part of our board of directors at the North Carolina Center. And among his many talents is moderation, so in every form. So he is also the executive director of the North Carolina Center for Voter Education. Welcome, David.
Well, thank you. And thank you all for being here. I want to get to our guests of honor and the folks you really came to hear. But before I do, I want to mention a couple things. First and foremost, the Center for Voter Education is going to be carrying this forum on our website, and it's an excellent opportunity if you want to help inform other women about this forum this evening to go ahead and forward that link out. We'll send it to you vis-a-vis the Junior League right there shortly thereafter this forum. Most importantly this evening, we're not here to have a head-to-head debate. This is not supposed to be a contentious evening. This is supposed to be an opportunity for these women to talk a little bit about how they got to where they are, why they're running for office, some of the opportunities that being a woman presents when you're in an elected forum, and also some of the challenges that are there. So let's just go ahead and start. How we're going to work this is alphabetically. So we're going to go all the way down the line here, and then we're going to come all the way back with each question. We're going to ask you to keep your questions or your remarks to about a minute, minute and a half, and that way it keeps moving along. I will gently nudge if we need to keep you moving forward. But otherwise, let's just go ahead and start with the first question, and that's simply, what got you here? How'd you get interested in running for public office? We'll start with Anne Marie Calabria, who's running for the North Carolina Court of Appeals.
Thank you, Damon. I was an attorney first in Fayetteville, and then I had my own law practice in Cary, and I had been in law practice for about 5 years in Cary, and at that time, 2 of my law school classmates from Campbell said that they were not going to be handling family law cases. So I was handling family law cases, and in Fayetteville everybody had custody mediation because it was the pilot program, but we didn't have it in Wake County at the time. So I had kept telling people we should have it, we should have it. And I said, well, I might as well run for judge and just say it. I really didn't think I would win. I never ran for anything in my life, not student council, not anything. And I just got up and said my message, and custody mediation would work for everybody, and went around. And in those days, we could hardly say anything, so it was a message. And when I won, everybody was in my family was very surprised. So that was 14 years ago.
Lauren Freeman running for Wake County District Court. I'm sorry. Wake
County
Clerk of Superior.
That's right.
My goodness, what am I doing here? Again, Lauren Freeman for Wake County Clerk of Superior Court.
Thank you, Damon. You know, when I first ran 4 years ago, if you had asked me the year or two preceding that if I would be running for clerk, I would have said no, probably not. I was working as an attorney at the Attorney General's office. I'd certainly been active in the community. But, you know, I have spent my life working through the court system, grew up in a family that was very involved in the court system and believed very much in the importance of the court system to our role of government, and also, you know, its ability to kind of solve problems for people. And as I was at the Attorney General's office, I was actually encouraged and approached about running by a number of folks here in our community, and decided that that was something that I had an interest in, something I felt like I could make a contribution to. And so I was very humbled and proud to have been elected clerk of court in Wake County in 2006.
Next we'll go to Jane Gray running for the North Carolina Court of Appeals.
I'll have to say that I have found myself, without realizing it, being asked to run. I'm an ENTJ, for those of you who do Myers-Briggs. The polite word is commandant, I think. So, from student council, vice president in high school, and I just found myself there, and I would never understand why. So, to this day, I guess I don't understand why. But probably the next biggest step I took was to be asked to run for president of the Wake County Bar Association in 2000, and I said okay, and I did it. I enjoyed that period of time very much, and then I continued to just be a lawyer, but was asked in 2002 to fill a vacancy on the Wake County District Court, realizing that that would mean a real election. And it was intimidating, but I said I would do it. And I'm happy to say that I've run unopposed twice. And then I was encouraged to run this year for the Court of Appeals, and have said that to people who have asked that at this point I have gotten over the horror of, oh my God, what if I lost? You know, my life is not over. So I put the fear aside and said, you know, I think I have something to offer. Other people seem to think I have something to offer, and so I got into the race.
Barbara Jackson, who's running for, well, we're in North Carolina, so the highest court in the land, the North Carolina Supreme Court.
I actually began my career at the Supreme Court the year I got out of law school 20 years ago as a law clerk. And I had no aspirations at that point in time. But when I was working for the Commissioner of Labor as her general counsel, I was reading Court of Appeals decisions and found that I didn't agree with some of them. And some of my peers were running for the Court of Appeals at that point in time, and kind of made me start thinking. So I went through a program called the Institute for Political Leadership, and I learned how to run a campaign and prepared myself. And I would certainly commend that program to any of you who are interested in public office. And in 2004, I ran for the Court of Appeals and won. And so when the opportunity arose last year, I too was approached by some folks who thought that I had the right qualifications for running for the Supreme Court, and here I am.
And I'll put in a shameless plug for the Center for Women in Public Service, which also offers some candidate training. We're good friends with the IOPL folks too. It's all good. Jan Kuchel, who's running for Wake County Clerk of Superior Court. What got you into this?
My start was a little different than everything you've heard. I was raised in a very large Catholic family, and I was raised by nuns, and we were always taught when you see a problem, you fix it. You don't walk away from it. And I didn't even go to college till I was 23. I was a mother at 18 and married, and when I was 20, I was a mother and unmarried. And I went to college because I felt I needed to give my son some type of a better future, and I got an undergraduate degree and got involved in the North Carolina Department of Corrections at that time through some fluke kinds of things, including watching our corrections department and some of our law enforcement. If any of you remember, way back then, Joanne Little had murdered her jailer. We were marching in East Carolina for that, way back. So I thought, well, okay, there's a big mess in this corrections department, so I'll finish my degree, go into corrections for a few years, straighten up the problems, and then go back and be a writer, which is what I wanted to be. Well, 23 years later, I still hadn't fixed the problems in corrections, but I also found that there were some problems in some other areas because I had gotten involved in the North Carolina Drug Cabinet because I had a specialty in substance abuse in the prison work. I was involved in a lot of the initial drug communities that were started in prisons. And when I got into that, you got into the governor's office. I was working for the governor and the lieutenant governor running the drug cabinet, and I realized how nasty politics was. And I also realized how unfair government was in many ways, and that's how I got involved. And I thought the best way was to go to law school, so at age 43 I decided to go to law school. And I don't know whether that was a mistake or not, but I practiced law for 20 years. It's not something that, I'm proud of what I did, and I'm proud of the work that I do, but it's not very fulfilling the way I practice law. I've never been a government lawyer per se. I've always practiced out in the community, and there's an awful lot of anger out there, and there's an awful lot of controversy between lawyers, and it's not the profession that apparently it used to be 30 years ago. I really don't know, but I ran for the clerk of court because of some severe problems that were in that office at that time, and I was elected, and the night I was elected I was home in blue jeans because no woman and no Republican had ever been elected to clerk of court, and I didn't think I was going to be the first one. But I was, and it was like I was the first woman warden in Illinois of a male prison, so I was just kind of a series of firsts in my life, and I think part of it is because I have a basic personality of being fairly aggressive. And yes, ladies, I do not mean assertive, I mean aggressive. I enjoy it, I get a lot of results that way. And I have straightened up a lot of problems in the areas that I have found myself in, whether it was in state government, in correctional institutions, in prisons, or in the clerk's office. So that's how I got into it.
And we're going to come actually right back to you, Jan, on this next question, which you kind of segued well to, and then we'll just work our way down the line. And that's a little bit about some distinct challenges about being a woman. Now, you all are running for a judicial office of some sort. All of you are lawyers. In both the law and policy, Janet, you alluded to this, can be a contentious arena. Now, is there something particular about being a female that shies people away from that or brings people to that? I want you guys to kind of expound on this notion of challenges to females in this, what has been a traditionally male-dominated world. Jen, we'll start with you.
Male-dominated world, meaning the world of attorneys and judiciary?
Well, yeah, both law and politics have traditionally been dominated by men, yeah. and that's changing now, as you guys are all a testament to. But I want to talk about being on that sort of front line. What are the challenges?
There actually weren't too many for me because in 1970 and 71, when I got into the North Carolina Department of Corrections, there were no women in corrections except at women's prison. And so I was one of the very first women. I remember going into some of these prisons where they would say things like, "Wow, we don't let women in here." And I said, "Well, you better call because they've sent me here to do a job." And I had people say, you know, you can't go in with the inmates and, you know, how you handle inmates and those kinds of things. So by the time I got to be a lawyer, although there were a few women and many, many men, I'd already crossed those bridges so many times it made no difference to me. And one of the attitudes that I always had was, well, you wouldn't have gotten that if you hadn't been a woman. They were looking for women in affirmative action. And my response has always been, well, sir, if you would like to be a woman, we can arrange that. We can make that happen. So I just kind of joked it off. And as the attorneys are, I think that women who are in solo practice have a whole lot harder time than women who are in firms. But that's just because people in solo practice have a lot more harder time than people who are in firms because of the support that you have in a firm and the power that you have that solo practitioners don't have. So in terms of male domination, I didn't really run into that much, as long as you joked it off is the way I kind of answer.
Barbara, Jackson, a little bit about the challenges of being on sort of the vanguard of women in public service.
You know, I hope y'all paid attention to the statistics that were read and heard the Superior Court numbers. Those are still pretty dramatic. I think that the District Court and the Court of Appeals, obviously there's now a majority of women on the Court of Appeals. And if I'm elected to the Supreme Court, there would be a majority of women on the Supreme Court. And I was asked about that, and I said, you know, I think that would be an interesting historical footnote, but I hope that's really all that it is. And I hope, and I've said this before, I really hope people vote for me based on qualifications, not based on anything else. I do think one of the things that's challenging for women, not every woman, but some women, and quite a few of us, is fundraising. And I don't know that we're raised in a culture of making the ask. And I think this is one thing that's great about the Junior League, and I say that as a sustaining member and someone who's been involved with the Building Without Boundaries program, where I know, been involved as a contributor. I know, and I encourage you all that are junior leaguers to get involved with that campaign, because it does help you learn about fundraising. And I think that's really critical for women to be involved in fundraising, both making the ask and giving. And that's a good opportunity, no matter what organization you're in, to learn that skill, because if you want to be involved in politics, it's really critical.
Jane Gray, same question, challenges.
Well, when I graduated from law school in 1979, there were less than 400 women attorneys in North Carolina. Think about that number, that's pretty staggering. And so we were something fairly new, and I was in the charter class at Campbell, and so we were really something new. And the only job offer that I got was as a paralegal in a firm that will remain nameless because they're still in business in Raleigh. And I haven't been discriminatory when they've appeared in front of me. But I did get an opportunity to go into the Attorney General's office. That was an opportunity that we were afforded, and not intending to stay as long as I did, it turned out to be a great opportunity. I do remember that when I was sworn in as an attorney, the judge that swore me in, who is now deceased, said, "Now, Ms. Gray, if I sentence your client, you gotta take it. Don't cry on me." Well, I mean, you wouldn't say that today. I mean, that's just not going to happen anymore today. So, coming from a class where there were 6 women in my class, now law school classes they're either at least half, if not a little over half, women. We have, I think, the boundaries have essentially been broken. It's not difficult anymore. It's not. I mean, it's. I remember I was appearing in court in Hertford County. No, excuse me. Where is Winton? Bertie County. And the judge that was presiding, I mean, it had gone over the entire county. The courtroom was packed because they wanted to see a lady lawyer from Raleigh. Well, I mean, that's like no big deal anymore. So in that respect, the challenges, I think, have been erased. As a candidate, I would say the same thing. It's not that unusual. I echo what Barbara said about the Superior Court. There are still challenges for women in the Superior Court because of the travel. Also, frankly, openings don't come that often. And there is still, and I don't want to call it the good old boy club, but people line up. The guys tell each other when they're going to retire, when they're stepping down. And so usually there's somebody lined up and they've been planning it. And so that's still out there, interestingly enough, I think, in that one place. But otherwise, I think the challenges that were there 30 years ago, maybe even 20 years ago, have largely been eliminated, and go for it.
I'd have to start by saying that I feel tremendously blessed, to have come of age and gone to law school and begun a career when I did, because there are a lot of people, and some of them sitting up here, who forged a path ahead of me and tackled a lot of challenges that, frankly, I just didn't have to. And I think, that's not to say that there aren't still challenges out there for women in the workplace, or certainly in, where you're dealing with a lot of law enforcement that's still a male-dominated field, or with attorneys. But overwhelmingly, those of us who've been lucky enough to go to school in the last 15, 20 years face a different reality than other folks. I also, had the fortunate circumstance of growing up, actually getting to spend time with Susie Sharp. I know probably many of you don't know who Susie Sharp was, but she was the the first woman Chief Justice of the North Carolina Supreme Court. She was the first woman Chief Justice elected in the United States. And she very much was a role model, and I grew up, being able to see women who had achieved all kinds of heights, and so, feeling like I really could do almost anything. I think, though, that the challenges that we have in public life are not that different than the challenges that anybody who's trying to work and have a family have. And I think when you think about Superior Court, most of y'all may not be aware of this, but for years our state was divided into, I think it was 4 regions. They've recently gone to 8 regions, Superior Court regions, and under our Constitution, Superior Court judges have to rotate within those regions. And so I think a lot of the reason why we don't see more women in Superior Court is the challenge of being away from home and having to rotate. And I think that's something that certainly as the state continues to become more subdivided, hopefully we'll see more women. So I think, anytime striking that balance. I have a 7-year-old. It was 9:30 last night when I walked in. She was still up. She'd not had her bath. And so those of you who are involved in the community, who are doing lots of things, your challenges are the same as my challenges from that standpoint.
Thanks, Lauren. Anne Marie Calabria.
I ran for the Court of Appeals 8 years ago, and my biggest challenge with that election was I had been a district court judge in Wake County for 6 years, and I was in Charlotte, and the reporter said, you have a primary, why is he running against you? I always had a male running against me as a district court judge. 1996, there was a male. 2000, male. 2002, so I was used to it by then. But this one said, oh, I didn't even know him though, because he was from Winston-Salem, and they said, why is he running? And I said, I don't know, why don't you ask him? And he said, she can't win in this state with her name, Calabria. When Jay talks about the good old boys, that's what he meant. He didn't exactly say that, but everybody knew it. And the newspaper picked it up, and that was certainly not the type of person that people in North Carolina wanted to vote for. So that challenge turned into a positive for me. And when I first heard it, I thought, oh great, this is wonderful. But I tell that story a lot because many times I'll be somewhere and they'll say, and where are you from? Well, my parents are born in Italy. I'm in North Carolina for 31 years, and I can't change my accent. This is it.
In addition to being office seekers, at one time or another, all of you have been office holders. And so this question is more about holding office than seeking office. But I think we'd benefit from getting a sense of, there's challenges to getting in. You all talked about that. There's some challenges to serving as well. Are we at a point in North Carolina's history where, Jane spoke a little bit about how those challenges are starting to diminish? Have we reached critical mass yet? I'm not looking for a long answer here. I just want to get a sense from all you. Are we at a point where being a woman is not so much different anymore in the public's mind than being a man when it comes to serving in office? And Anne Marie, we'll start with you.
Well, in our court, as you know, we had a big picture in Lawyers Weekly for anybody who's a lawyer that when Sherry Beasley came, that women became the majority on our court. So for the Court of Appeals,
Lauren Freeman?
I can't think of any limitation or any way in which being a woman has impacted my work in the court system. And so I think people are very much accustomed to women holding these positions and being professional at this point. And
Jane Gray.
Well, despite what there may be people out there who think of North Carolina and may not think we're so progressive. We have a woman U.S. Senator, we have a woman governor, we've got 6 women on the Council of State. I think that pretty much says it right here, that at least the citizens of North Carolina are receptive to women holding office, and no holds barred. We get criticized. Nobody is treating us as if we couldn't take it if somebody wants to say something against us. So I say yes, we've made it.
Barbara Jackson.
And perhaps most importantly for us, we've got
Chief
a woman Chief
Justice.
Justice. Absolutely. Which was really kind of neat on Inauguration Day last year, that you know, you had the woman Chief Justice swearing in the woman governor. That was quite a banner day. With the number of women on the Council of State and everything, I think it really does demonstrate quite a bit of progress in our state. And you know, as Judge Calabria said, I've really at the Court of Appeals haven't seen anything that's made me feel any impact as a woman serving on the Court of Appeals.
Jan Pruchel.
The same thing in terms of the judiciary. I think that we have parity at this point, just by the numbers and the way women are treated. I don't think that's so true in the legislature. I think there's a lot less women in both the House and the Senate of the North Carolina General Assembly than there are in many, many other states, but I think that that's coming along. So as far as this profession is concerned, I think it's kind of gone the way of the medical profession, where more and more women are going into law school and eventually working their way up into the firms and into the judiciary. So yes, I don't see any problem or any problems that women face that are separate from what men face in public office.
See, this worked out really well, because the next question is about aspiring advice for aspiring politicians. I'm sure there's some here in the crowd this evening who are going to be in public service at some point, and now you've all talked about how the barriers are diminishing. So let's give some advice to these folks. We'll start with you, Jan Pruchel. Advice on being a candidate for office and being a woman.
Do what you like, do what makes you happy, do what interests you. Don't try and plan a career and say, well, if I start here, I won't like this job, but eventually in 2 years I'll get to move up to this one. Go where you're going to be happy and where you're going to be satisfied, because that will bring out the best in you, and your career will evolve, and 10 or 15 years down the road you'll think, gosh, I never thought that I would end up here. When I started, that was not my goal. And I think that's the most important thing, is that you get some sort of personal satisfaction out of it.
I think that's really excellent advice. I mean, I never had a long-term plan that I think I'll like to be a Court of Appeals judge and be running for the Supreme Court. That, frankly, was never on my radar screen. It's just really, if I sit back and think about it, it's really quite mind-boggling that I'm here. But I really did do what I love and followed my heart, and that led me to public service. Through the initial work at the Supreme Court and the governor's office, immediately before running for the Court of Appeals, I served as general counsel to the Labor Department, and I've really enjoyed all those jobs, and they've fed my heart and my soul far more than a career in private practice did. It just wasn't really for me, I found, during the time that I did engage in private practice. As I said earlier, I think prepare yourself. I chose the Institute for Political Leadership, the
Center for Women in Public Service.
Yeah, I've been visited with some of their programs too, also an excellent resource, or do both. I don't think you can be over-prepared. You know, I think getting out there and learning how to run a campaign. The first time I ran a statewide campaign on about $28,000. I do not recommend that. It worked out well for me, but it's a lot more fun to have funding in place. It takes a big weight off your shoulders. So be prepared when you embark on your journey.
Jane Gray.
Thank you. I think in addition to having a career and doing something that you like, you're not going to be as well-rounded a person if you aren't engaged in community service. And putting yourself out there in the community exposes you to all kinds of people you would not have met. You know, we're all lawyers, but I want to know people other than lawyers in my life, and I don't want everybody out here to think, well, I guess we have to be a lawyer to run for public office. Not true. So I would encourage you to, those of you who are in the junior league, you know everything there is to know about community service. Those of you who are not, there are so many opportunities, and that will open doors for you that you never thought about. And good news is you're leaving a really good positive footprint behind, regardless of whether you end up being elected to office. But you would be surprised at how supportive those people will be to you if you decide to run for office.
Lauren Freeman.
A couple of things come to mind. I think first and foremost, believe in what you're doing. I think you have to really be committed to what you're doing and believe that you can make a difference. and have a vision for what you want to do when you get there, and what changes you want to make, and what improvements, and what you can give back. And I think that's the foremost thing I would say, because there are days when, and I think all of us would attest to that, there are days when you're worn out, when there's a lot going on, and you have to get back to that core of you're doing something for the right reason because you can make a difference. So that's the number one thing. On a more practical note, I will tell you that as I have been involved in campaigns and for some time, that I see women as stronger and stronger in terms of building campaigns and building political capital. I think Judge Jackson's exactly right. The ability to raise money is very important and ask for money. But women, much more so than men, not trying to stereotype too much, are big networkers. We stay in touch with people. We know who our kids' friends are. We know, who their parents are. We kind of are part of book clubs or part of circles at our church. And when you get ready to run for office, connecting with those people, because if you believe in something that you're doing and it's good and right, those folks are going to want to help you, and they've got their circles. And so, women are very powerful campaigners and very powerful networkers, to some extent, much more so than men. And so, capitalize on that, use that, and bring your friends and their friends along to support you.
Anne-Marie Calabria.
I have 2 adult daughters who are not lawyers. One of them is an accountant, and she's in Charlotte, and the other was a math and science teacher who was a stay-at-home mom until I brought her back into service to help me with this campaign. I see both of them, even though they said, oh, I never want to be a lawyer, I don't want to be a public official like you are, but I see both of them at their ages. One's 37, one's 32. The 32-year-old is working hard this weekend. She's treasurer of the Komen Foundation in Charlotte, and she's working, they have their race this weekend. And of course, Gina is my campaign manager this time, and she has 3 children, ages 3, 5, and 7. So she has her own challenges just being a campaign manager and helping me out. But that is a good way. I see someday the tables turned, I'll be her campaign manager, and she'll be running for something. So I think helping other candidates gives you that confidence. She actually went to an event the other night. She's usually a behind-the-scenes person, and she said, I don't like to do that. I said, all you have to do is get up and say this and say that. She sends scripts to other people, and I can't be at places, but she got up and did it, and I think she's on her way.
Well, we're going to open it up here, questions here in just a second, but before we do, I would be remiss. Did I miss anything? What would I, if you had a chance to not say another word this evening, what was the one thing I missed? We're going to go real quickly. We're going to start with you, Anne-Marie Calabria.
So broad.
So broad. Well, I'll tell you what, open it up to any of you. What did I miss? Look at this, thorough. Well, they're going to have some questions for you.
If it's related to campaigning, for example, if you make the decision to run, the best piece of advice that I've gotten, I haven't always followed, but was don't get too tired. Because you can, especially if, I don't care, some of us are running statewide, which is sort of insane, but if the advice was if you get too tired, you'll make mistakes. And that really is true. And so if you decide to go and run, do it, but don't forget to take care of yourself.
And on that, we will open up the questions to the audience. We've got just a few minutes for questions. Am I right, Kenny? Audience, join in. It's all sorts of fun.
So before we take our first question, I just wanted to follow up on something that one of our panelists had mentioned, and that is that North Carolina currently ranks 18th in terms of women serving in state legislatures. So we're working our way up the ladder there.
Is there a southern statistic on that? Those always make me feel good. Usually
Yeah.
Questions from the audience? We'll start here and then we'll work back to you.
You had mentioned that all of you are attorneys and kind of worked your way into political office through that route. What would your suggestion be for someone who has no desire to go into law but is interested in the political side? What would your suggestion be? I guess anybody really, all of the above.
I actually got into the political side a little bit before going to law school. I volunteered on a Senate campaign, and this was back in 1986, and I didn't go to law school until 1987. But a lot of the contacts that I made in that 1986 campaign are still people that I know and run into, and people I later worked with. I think getting out and volunteering on campaigns is also, and I think somebody else mentioned that as an idea, is a really great way to get started. And picking one campaign and getting really involved in it and getting to know some of the people that are in the leadership positions in that campaign is really a great way to get involved.
Helps if it's a winning campaign too,
Right.
right?
That's always a bonus. Although the one I volunteered on wasn't.
Oh, there you go.
It was a statewide campaign. The candidate didn't win, but those contacts still were very valuable contacts.
Another thing that I would recommend is, there are lots of boards and commissions. And for example, I've been on the City of Raleigh Human Relations Commission now for my 5th year. I'm currently the vice chair. And most of these cities and counties and certainly state government, there are all kinds of ways that you can be involved in serving, short of actually being in an elected position. A lot of times, getting involved in that way and seeing how certain parts of government work and working with a council, city council on an issue or a larger body on an issue, is a good path to learn the system, but also, to start building a resume that says, look, I want to serve, I want to be in public service, and these are the things I've done for my community.
And it just so happens that the North Carolina Center for Women in Public Service has a one-day training on women on board, how to familiarize yourself with how to do the research and what's involved at both the municipal, county, and state levels. So we'd love to come in and do an in-house for the junior leader.
Not the only one who's into shameless self-promotion.
I want to
Go, please.
In 1996, when I ran for district court judge the first time, my sister-in-law came from Pennsylvania to help me. And then she, after her children were grown up a little bit, then she ran for city council there. She doesn't live in this state, and she was doing that for a while. Then she ran for mayor, and now she's mayor of the town that she was city council for. And I just think that is a manageable way, as opposed to running statewide, that we, our job is right now. But it's a nice way to get started. You're also more visible, though, when you're on city council or the mayor of a town.
Or the school board. Nothing's happening.
If you're brave enough to consider the school board.
I mean, my sister-in-law's not a lawyer. She's not a lawyer, and she's the mayor of the town. So, she was a teacher.
But there are a lot of former teachers and PTA super volunteers that have worked their way into school board races, so that's certainly something. Planning commission is a appointed job that leads a lot of people into further service on a city council or a county commission.
It wasn't too long ago in North Carolina you didn't need to be a lawyer to run for judge. That's no longer true.
Well,
anyway. There was another question in the back. You, please.
Sandra, I have a question about fundraising for those of you who are statewide candidates, particularly for the two of you who were district court judges at the county level. I understand that those are public funded campaign finance issues, and I'd like to know, can you compare and contrast about raising money for your county campaign versus being public funded for your statewide campaign?
I will. I was going to say, the good thing about unopposed, filing fee and I was done. So I haven't had to experience the fundraising. It probably was the #1 discouraging factor for me, was the thought of asking for money. Is just not in my nature, but obviously you have to do it. For the Court of Appeals race, and I did elect to participate and did qualify for the public finance funds, I learned that just because people tell you you're wonderful doesn't mean they're going to write you a check. And that it's hard work, and you know, I don't know if anybody else hadn't had to do this, calling people up and asking them on the phone. I worked for a politician who used to say it's dialing for dollars afternoon. I mean, you do have to do that. People are willing to give you money if you personally ask them, but they're not so generous when it just pass the message through somebody. And that was a lesson that I was not necessarily prepared to learn. But it was, it doesn't seem that hard to raise approximately $40,000 from 350 people, but it's hard, $10 to $500 amounts. It was a little harder than I thought, but it was, on the other hand, really a good thing to require us to do, to draw down those public funds. And you know, I think we all qualify. The three of us are doing this. Not all of the candidates qualified. So it is much harder, I think, ironically, to raise the money for that. But I'm very glad it's there. I probably would have declined. I can't imagine having to try to raise the necessary funds for a statewide race without public financing.
I'll talk about the public financing. I actually hired somebody to help me with the public to raise the money, and they were able to help with the small checks, the $10 checks. It wasn't that hard for, in fact, Jennifer went to Peace College, and if it wasn't for David, Dr. McLennan, helped connect us when she was a student, and she was in, what course was it?
Political leadership.
Political leadership. And Jennifer came with me back in 2006, 4 years ago. I was in between my term, and I ran for the Supreme Court that year. And she just, after she finished her hours, she said, I want to help you some more. And so when I was getting into this race, I called her and I said, what are you doing? Come back and help me. And she did, but then I still had to do the dialing for dollars too, because you can get lots of $10 checks, but to get the total amount, you have to get on the phone. And people, now judges are allowed to do that. In 1996, when I first started, 14 years ago, the judges were not allowed to raise their own money. So you had to have a committee. And it was really hard for people to understand that, because we were the only ones that were not allowed to ask for money. And they would say, well, just tell her to call me. We're not allowed to call you. So that was a challenge.
I think the insight that I have is, I mentioned in 2004 I didn't qualify. I actually filed for public financing, and it was the first year, and people were very, very confused. I think that they understand it much better now, but there were 4 people in the primary race, and people wanted to wait until after the primary to make their decision. With public financing, you have to have your money raised by the time of the primary. And for the Supreme Court this year, you had to have approximately $41,000 from at least 350 contributors. So it was, you know, it was very challenging still to raise it. It's still a lot of work. And again, involves, it amazed me how people really, there is a certain group of people out there who really do expect a personal phone call from you, and it's just an interesting study in personalities. It's quite fascinating. But then there's so many people out there who are just circulating emails on your behalf and out there pounding the pavement, the smaller checks and everything. So I had about $57,000 that I pulled in from about 830 people. And I am eternally grateful to each one of those people for their help to me. Because again, running the statewide campaign 6 years ago on $28,000 really gives you an appreciation for the difference, in being able to really run a campaign the way it needs to be run versus not knowing what's going to happen, because you can send out one mailing to one county. So that was what I was, that's what I could do then. So it's a huge difference. It really is.
Next question.
So I believe you said that Susie Sharp was one of your role models, and that she just had a book come out or written about her. And she had said, or in her memoirs, that she never got married because she wasn't able to handle, being a judge, being an attorney, and home life. So what advice would you give for people trying to balance both, to any of you?
I think I was the one that said that about Susie Sharp. First of all, I refuse to believe anything that's in that book. When I knew her, she was probably in her 70s and was always very, prim and put together. There's a lot about that. As a child, I can remember her talking about the challenges of doing that, why she hadn't chosen to do that. I didn't know she had all this other stuff going on. But you know, I think that there are times when I've thought, golly, maybe she was right. I know that for me personally, she wasn't. I think that what it boils down to me, I was thinking about this last night, frankly, is that you have to believe in what you're doing. And you have to believe that you're doing it for the right reasons. And you have to believe that, you know, when your daughter grows up or your children grow up, that they will see that and understand that, and that you're setting, you know, the right kind of role model and trying to contribute to your community. So I think on a larger scale, that would be my response. I think on a more practical scale, you have to set some boundaries. I mean, there have definitely been things this campaign that I probably should have gone to, that I just knew I couldn't. Because at some point, you know, you have to decide what you can do and what's, you know, what you have to do, and then what you might not necessarily need to do, and when it's more important to be home or to spend time with your daughter. And I think, you know, having to have a clear picture, and then sometimes just telling yourself, you know, you just can't do that. It's time for you to be home tonight. So.
When I ran the first time in 1996, my children were 11, 19, and 23. So, you know, the older two were off doing whatever. In fact, my daughter, who was 19, she was at state, and she said, "Why are you doing this? We're going to have to be good." So I said, "You have to be good anyway." And my son, he was just 11, and so he kind of grew up with it and always helped me with everything, especially the computer work, because that wasn't my best skill. So you get them to help you when you have children.
I think the point about, you know, sometimes you really do have to say no for the benefit of your family or your loved ones is very important. When I ran in 2004, I was single and I wasn't involved with anybody, and, you know, so my parents and I were involved in the campaign, and I pretty much did everything that came along because there wasn't a reason not to. And I'm engaged and getting married next year for the first time at the age of 49, which is kind of interesting. But anyway, but my fiance, you know, I think it's very important not to just abandon him this year. So you know, I've made a couple choices to carve out time that, you know, I've said, okay, this is just not going to happen this time. You know, we've kind of watched for some things and everything. He knows that he is being abandoned in the month of October. But, you know, I tell you though, it does give me so much empathy for people that run for Congress and U.S. Senate and our legislators and the sacrifices that they make for their families, because we're fortunate, you know, we have 8-year terms at the state level, and folks that run at the more local level, it's what the sacrifices that they and their families make, and people really do expect them to be at every event and ask where they are when they're not there, and it really is a tremendous sacrifice. But you just, you know, at some point you have to set a boundary and say, you know, the family is important, the spouse is important, and we need to spend time with them, you know, just as you need to spend time with your family, your spouse.
It's a hard thing to do. It's a hard thing to do. And so you do make choices, and you hope you make good ones. I have a 29-year-old son, and I think he's turned out okay, so he didn't get too damaged by it. But I also have a fantastic husband, and he calls it when I beg. Sometimes I don't even have to beg. He calls it driving Judge Jamie. He will take me to campaign events so that I'm not getting too tired, and I really have appreciated that. He has totally bailed me out. But years ago, when our son was younger, I made a decision that I would deny things that I would like to do. And I was fortunate enough to, I mean, it really cost me money to do this. But I loved my career. But I found a fantastic housekeeper. And she stayed with me for 14 years. After my son went to college, she was taking care of me. And I still keep in touch with her. I love her. She made it possible for me to have, you know, a family that I think was sort of being held together. And a child that was not going to turn out too warped, and we came through it that way. But that was a gift.
I'd be remiss not to add one thing, and that is that, you know, I'm very fortunate to have a lot of family here locally, and really having that. My in-laws are retired. My daughter is their only grandchild, and, you know, I need to at least shout out to them because I mean, they are a huge help, as are my dad and stepmom, and I think having that network and that support, whether it's your family or friends, is really very critical to keeping that balance and to helping carry the load.
Jen, you were going to say something?
Well, I was going to make it kind of analogous to people that are trying to do 2 or 3 things at the same time. Excuse me, when I decided to go to law school, no one stepped forward to pay my mortgage, so I had to go to law school at night and work full time. And that was fine because I was used to succeeding at my job. I was used to people saying, gosh, you're just doing great. And when I had been to school previously, I was used to being one of the top people and not having too much trouble in terms of testing and that kind of thing. And my family always came first for me, and I always did birthday parties and all that. You put all 3 of those together and you can't do good at anything. So you have to say to yourself, all right, I should be an A student, but I'm only going to be a C to B student. And I used to do all the birthday parties. Now we're just going out to Chico's or wherever those places they take chick something, Chuck E. Cheese. And in regard to my job, yes, I used to have everything 2 weeks early, and now some of it's going to be a little late. So you disappoint yourself more than you do anybody else because you have these high expectations that you've always been at the top. And when you take on these extra, like a campaign on top of your job or with your family, etc., just understand that it's okay. You're just not going to be the best in all of those for a period of time because there just isn't enough time in the day.
Well, on that note of not enough time in the day, we want to thank you all for coming on out here. Appreciate taking some time today to spend with us. So please, a round of applause for the candidates. There are refreshments outside. I saw some Pellegrino and some divine chocolate. So, please join us out there for some refreshments, and thank you for your time.
From September 29th, 2010, this has been a replay of VoterRadio.com's coverage of a forum featuring female candidates for the North Carolina Supreme Court, Court of Appeals, and Wake County Clerk of Court. For more information about these and other North Carolina candidates, visit ncvoterguide.org, an online voter guide presented by the NC Center for Voter Education and UNC-TV. For this and other Election 2010 programming, visit VoterRadio.com.
Make the most of your vote. Go to ncvoterguide.org before you go to the polls. Research every candidate for national, state, and local races. See where they stand in their own words. Why they want your vote. Then check your voting status. Find your polling place and go vote. ncvoterguide.org. A free public service from the North Carolina Center for Voter Education and UNC-TV. This November, make the most of your vote with ncvoterguide.org.